Okay, so we're looking at fertility today, and here is a pregnancy test that a female has just done, and these two lines mean that she's pregnant. So how do people become pregnant? This is Chloe and Jack. We've been hoping to get pregnant for a long time, and they're not managing to, and it's really starting to get us down. Why doesn't every incidence of sexual intercourse result in a pregnancy? Okay, so this couple have been having sexual intercourse for about a year and a half, and they've not managed to actually conceive a child or for it to end in a pregnancy. So fertilization is either not happened or the embryo has not managed to implant and start developing. So let's look into why not every incidence of sexual intercourse results in a pregnancy. So there's something that we need to tell you about called the menstrual cycle. Okay, the menstrual cycle is something that occurs in the bodies of some mammals, not all mammals, but some mammals. It is caused by the different hormones that are released by the brain and also the ovaries. So it takes place in the female's body, and it's a result of hormones being released by the brain and the ovaries. And it means that there's only a short period of time, only a few days each month, where the female is actually fertile, where they're able to have fertilization take place. So there's these different stages. There is ovulation. So ovulation, you need to know that term. It's for when there is an egg cell released from the ovaries. Okay? So ovulation is when an egg cell is released from the ovaries, and you've written in the task from last lesson that this only happens once a month. Okay? Hormones released by the brain cause an egg to develop, and it is then released. It can then be released from the ovary. The next thing that has to happen is this lining of the uterus wall. It's called blood-rich tissue lining. The endometrium is the scientific term for it, but you don't need to know that. But if we just say the blood-rich tissue, the lining of the uterus gets thicker. So look, in this diagram, it is thicker. So hormones released by the ovaries cause the lining of the uterus to thicken, ready for an embryo to implant. So if this egg cell meets a sperm, then they fuse together during fertilization, and then that produces a zygote, and then the zygote divides into an embryo, which is a ball of cells, and then it'll implant there in the uterus wall. However, if an egg cell was released, but there was no sperm to meet it because the person didn't have sexual intercourse during that time, then there's no embryo to implant. So the lining of the uterus breaks down and is shed out via the vagina, and this is called menstruation, where the lining of the uterus is shed. Okay, this is a bit of detail. You don't need to know all this detail, but you might be able to take something from it. So, from days 1 to 5, the menstrual cycle lasts about 28 days. Sometimes it's slightly longer for some people. 28 days, so just shorter than a month actually. Between days 1 to 5, the lining is actually being shed. Okay, so during this period, this is when menstruation is happening, and this is what you might have heard of the term when the female is on their period. Okay, so that's what we say, it's the period of time which they're menstruating for. Okay, after this period, hormones cause the egg to develop and mature, ready for it being released, and more hormones cause the lining of the uterus to build up and get thicker again. Okay, so from 6 to 19 days, the blood-rich lining of the uterus is getting thicker and thicker and thicker. until it reaches its maximum. So it's thicker from it being very thin. But a very special thing happens on day 14. Ovulation happens. Now, as I say, in some individuals it could be day 12 or day 18, but it's roughly halfway through the cycle, ovulation happens and an egg cell is released from the ovary. If during this period the egg cell is fertilised, then it can divide into an embryo and implant in this thick tissue, okay? And the little compartment where the egg cell was in the ovary starts releasing another hormone which keeps it nice and thick, okay? And again, up to 28 days, but if no fertilisation happened and there was no embryo to implant, then we go back to day 1 and the lining is shed and we get menstruation again. So here's a little diagram to help you visualise it. So here we've got day 1. So the lining's getting thinner. This is menstruation. Okay, and then up to day 14. This is ovulation. And then the rest of it it's getting thicker and thicker again. Okay, so actually, if sexual intercourse happens here, the sperm can live for about 3 days. If sexual intercourse happened here and there was some sperm release, they might live long enough to meet the egg cell on day 14. Or if the egg cell was released, it lives for about a day. So the sperm could fertilise it here. So really, we only have this period within the month from 12 to 16 days, 12 to 16, 4 days in the menstrual cycle where the female is fertile. If a female was to have sexual intercourse on any other day within the cycle, then it would be unlikely to result in a pregnancy. Let's get back to Chloe and Jack. Chloe has been taken to their GP and they've been referred to the Bradford Royal Infirmary, the BRI, for lots of tests to try and find out what the problem is. Why can't they get pregnant? Some of these tests are quite simple and others are quite invasive and might be like a form of surgery. So let's have a look at these tests. So they can have a tube x-ray. This is Chloe will have an x-ray and look at her oviducts to see if there's a blockage. Can the egg cell not get out of the ovaries? Is that the problem? They'll have an ultrasound scan of the actual uterus. Is there something wrong with the uterus, which means that the egg cell couldn't implant? Is there damage to the uterus? Is there some scarring inside it? Has it been infected? Blood tests. These blood tests look at all those hormones that are involved in controlling the menstrual cycle. So if she's not producing the right hormones at the right time and the menstrual cycle is not functioning as it should be, perhaps that's why she can't get pregnant. This is the first one for Jack. This is a sperm check. So he'll have to give some of his sperm and they'll have to look at under the microscope, look at all the different types of sperm. Are they the right shape, size? Are they moving in the right direction? Are they capable of functioning properly? How many are there? The penetration test, this is actually looking to see whether the sperm can get inside the egg. A lot of you on your homework last time said that the sperm's got a special little thing called an acrosome on the head, which produces chemicals and enzymes to let it get into the egg cell. So that's what it needs to be able to function, needs it to be functioning properly to try and get into the egg cell. An abdomen check, so this is like surgery. So what they'll do, so this is lady here, they'll make a little puncture in her stomach and put a camera in and they'll look around the outside of the uterus and the ovaries and make sure that they look all healthy, okay? Sometimes some of that tissue that's supposed to grow inside the uterus, that blood-rich tissue that sort of grows thicker and then is shed, sometimes for some reason that grows outside the uterus, in between all the organs, and it can actually damage the outside of the uterus. So they're checking for that blood-rich tissue outside of the uterus rather than inside of the uterus. Egg release check. So again, they can insert a little camera and look to make sure that the eggs are being released by the ovaries in the right way. And finally, a mucus test. They can test the mucus of the cervix, which is here, to make sure that there's nothing wrong with it and it will allow the sperm to get through. So you will be given some results of those tests and you'll have to come up with a theory or a hypothesis as to what is causing the problem. Why can't Chloe and Jack conceive?